Hey friends, welcome to episode 10 of The Fairy Tale Thief. We have about 50 pages left until we come to the end of the book. So I'm excited to get there. I don't think we'll get there today, but if you enjoy these episodes, please hit the like and subscribe button. Without any further ado, here we are at chapter 17, episode 10 of The Fairy Tale Thief. Grace ended the call to Gabby. Rage zipped through her as she counted the bills with shaking fingers. $6,000 under the mattress. Could there be more? The doors to the walk-in closet tempted her. Taking a ragged breath, she stepped inside and rifled around. She found another fat envelope tucked inside a pair of boots. A chocolate box held another. Several more were hidden in an old handbag. Some had been stashed inside shoe boxes, between folded sweaters, under a magazine collection, on the top shelf, stuffed into a hat. She pulled out all of the envelopes and gathered the bills on the floor. It was too much to count. And if it was too much for Grace, then it was probably too much for her grandparents too. The boots, the handbag, the hat, the candy box. These were all Grandma Dorothy's things. Did Grandpa Hank even know all of this existed? How about Mom? Which led to a bigger question. What if she took some? Not all of it, of course, but just enough so they could return to Salmondale. All of them, including Mom and Toby. There was a good chance that Grandma Dorothy wouldn't even miss it, and Grandpa Hank probably didn't even know it existed. Grace battled tears and indecision as she slowly began to count the money, making stacks of $1,000. $30,940. Not a fortune, but enough to live on until Dad could come home, assuming he ever came home. Her grandparents didn't need this money. They lived in a mansion worth millions of dollars. They could hire someone to cook and clean for them. They could afford to go and live in Leisure World, the mammoth retirement community near the coast. Was it right her family had to work so hard while her grandparents were so awful? Tears spilled down Grace's cheeks and landed on the bills. She could stuff a few into her pockets. She could carry all of it away and hide it in her room, or the lilac shop, or even school. No one would know. No one would know but her. Grace, Toby called from the next room. Her heart beat faster. What to do? What to do? Grace, where are you? She cleared her throat. Up here, Tobes. He pounded up the stairs, letting her know that she had about 2 seconds to decide. The bedroom door creaked open as Toby came in. His feet padded across the carpet and into the closet. What are you doing with all of that money? He asked, his eyes reminding her of the dog with the teacup eyes. I found it. Huh! Grace watched him try to process what all this money meant to him. Can we get something from the ice cream man? No, Tobe, sorry. This isn't ours. Grace climbed to her feet and brushed her hands on her jeans. She felt dirty. Toby followed her into the master bathroom where she washed her hands with Grandma Dorothy's lavender-scented soap. Even that made her feel like she was stealing. Below, she heard the rumble of the garage door rolling open. They're home, Toby said. Are you going to hide it? No. Then they'll know you found it. Yeah. Toby bent to pick up a bill, but she stopped him. Don't, Toby. You don't want to be that person. Putting her hand on his shoulder, she guided him out of the room and down the stairs. They found the grand unit sitting at the kitchen table and Heather in front of the refrigerator, clearly trying to decide what to make for lunch. I found some money, Grace said. Her grandparents stared at her. Heather noticed Grace's tear-stained face, and a concerned wrinkle appeared between her eyebrows. A lot of money, Toby announced. $37,940, Grace said, trying to keep her voice from shaking. Grandpa Hank snorted. We don't have that kind of money lying around. Grace shot Grandma Dorothy a look. Yes, you do. Grandma wore the same baffled expression she wore every day. I don't know anything about any money. Obviously you do. Grace's voice sounded shrill. And you make us your slaves. We cook, we clean, we run your errands, and you give us zilch. We don't give you zilch, Grandma Dorothy said. I don't even know what that means. We don't give you anything. Exactly. How could she live with these people? How would they ever manage to raise her mother? Are you sure, Gracie? Heather asked. She looked like the Statue of Liberty, except she had a jar of mayonnaise poised in the air instead of a lantern. Grace nodded, feeling like a bobblehead doll. I counted it. $30,940. Heather slowly set down the mayonnaise jar and rounded on her grandparents. And when our mom needed money to go and visit our dad, you let Grace buy her ticket? Grace, who goes to work every day and pays for our food and clothes? You make us work here for free when you can clearly afford to hire someone, Grace added. A fire of self-righteousness burned so brightly inside her, she thought she might burst with the heat of it. Grandpa Hank slapped his hand down on the table. Stop this caterwauling right this dadbird minute. We ain't got that kind of money lying around. Grace braced her hands on the table, leaned forward, and got right in their faces. Yes, you do. Come on, Grandpa, Toby said. I'll show you. They all trooped upstairs, Grandma Dorothy coming up last. Grace pushed open the closet doors so they could see the mountain of money. Grandpa stared, open mouth, a dribble of drool forming on his open lips. What the dadgum? Grandma folded her arms and raised her chin. What were you doing, snooping through my things? I was changing your sheets. Grace stepped up so she could look her grandmother in the eye. Something that from here on out, I'm going to start charging you for. Now, see here, Grandpa blustered. You got no call talking to your grandmother like that. And neither of you has any right to make us your personal slaves. Grandpa huffed. So you think that you should just get this house for free when we die? Grace glared at him. I don't care what you do with your house when you die. You can leave it to someone else if you want. But I do know one thing. You can't take it with you. And there's no promise any of us will outlive you. You're so mean, probably too mean for heaven or even hell. If no one wants you now, they won't want you when you're dead either. Shaking, Grace stormed out of the house. She slammed through the door, stomped down the stairs, and crashed out the back door. She went to the orange tree in the side yard, where she collapsed and sobbed. Brock wandered into his mom's room, wishing it could tell him where she was or when she would return. He loved his mom with a tender ache, but the older he got, the more he realized that his mom wasn't like other moms, and his family wasn't like other families. And that was okay, mostly. He returned to the dining room where he had his books spread out over the table and tried to focus on world history. During the Black Plague in the mid-14th century, an estimated 75 to 200 million people had died. So in a family of 4, as he thought most families were, one would die. He was in a family of 2, although he often felt as if he were really in a family of just 1. Not that he had known any other family situation. He knew the sitcoms on TV were lies. He knew he wasn't the only child on the planet living alone with a single mom. But sometimes when night fell and the big house rang with silence, he felt like the only person on his own planet. Sure, he could call a friend, organize a study group, or go to something or other at school, join a club, take up a sport. He didn't have to stay at home at the house alone, waiting for his mom to come back from wherever she was. He concentrated on the textbook in front of him. In men and women alike, it first betrayed itself by the emergence of certain tumors in the groin or armpits, some of which grew as large as a common apple, others as an egg. From the 2 said parts of the body, this deadly gaviashalo soon began to propagate and spread itself in all directions indifferently. Yuck. Brock pushed away from the table. He considered grabbing something to eat, but he'd lost his appetite about the time the plague hit the European shores. He opened the French doors. A soft breeze blew in, carrying the unmistakable sound of someone crying. He went to the wall that separated his property from Grace's grandparents and spotted Grace curled into a ball at the base of the orange tree. Her face was hidden beneath the cloud of her dark hair. Her shoulders shook with sobs. Grace? Brock braced his elbows on the wall. You okay? She mutely shook her head. I hate them, she said. I hate them so hard. Who? Grace wiped her tears with the back of her hand and jerked her head toward the house. Your grandparents? Brock guessed. She just looked at him. He'd never seen her before with red puffy eyes, blotchy skin, and bleached splattered clothes. He knew his mom would think she looked awful, but something about her sadness tugged at him. He found himself even more drawn to her. You want some ice cream? Ice cream isn't going to help. She rubbed her nose. It can't hurt. Ice cream never hurts. You wouldn't say that if you had diabetes. Do you have diabetes? Brock asked. No, Grace admitted. Come on, he said. It'll make you feel better. Not if I was lactose intolerant. Brock smiled. Are you lactose intolerant? She shook her head. Maybe you don't want to feel better. Maybe you want to stay mad. He reached over the wall and extended his hand. She studied him. Why would I want to do that? Because if you're mad, you'll feel better about leaving. Brock started to feel awkward about his extended hand. If she didn't take it soon, he'd have to pull away, and he didn't want to withdraw from her. She swallowed hard, took his hand, and let him help her over the wall. She nearly toppled on top of him, but quickly regained her footing. Grace, Heather called from her grandparents' yard. Over here, Grace answered. Heather stuck her head over the wall. We need to talk. I know. A small smile touched Heather's face. Hey, I'm proud of you. Grace sniffed. What for? You could have pocketed that money. How do you know I didn't? Because I know you, Grace said. Heather said. We're going to have some ice cream, Brock told Heather. Do you want some? No, Heather motioned toward the house. I'm going to fix some lunch, but let's talk when you get back. She cleared her throat. I know you're going to have to apologize at some point, right? Tears brimmed in the corner of Grace's eyes and her lips trembled. Brock put his hand on the small of Grace's back and she leaned into him. We won't be back until late, Brock said. We're going to the Sherwood Forest Scarefest. But not tonight, Grace said. Why not? He asked. Why not indeed? After stopping at North Pole Nosh's, they went to the Veterans Thrift Store in search of zombie wear. They picked through the racks, laughing at wide lapels, bell-bottom pants, and disco nylon shirts. Finally, they settled on a pair of gray flannel wool pants, a black t-shirt, and a gray canvas army jacket for him, and a long maroon skirt, a black lace blouse, and a wine-colored velvet blazer for Grace. Then they went to the park to tear holes in their new clothes and rub dirt into them. After that, they went to the Halloween store to buy makeup. Standing at the mirror in Brock's powder room, Grace applied black lipstick while he tried to circle his eyes with kohl. Grace watched, smiling. Hey, Brock said, don't laugh. You practice this stuff way more than me. Grace lifted her shoulder. I'm pretty new to it, too. I didn't wear makeup in Oregon. No? Grace shook her head. Everything I know about makeup, I learned from Gabby. Still, I am better than you. She stuck out her hand. Brock passed her the eyeliner. Close your eyes, she said, right before she applied his makeup. Standing so close gave him a tight feeling in his chest, as if he couldn't get his breath. He wondered if she might feel that way, too. Oops, Grace said. Oops, Brock's eyes flew open. Here, she smeared some white face paint on his. No one can even see it. Brock looked at the black smudge on his cheek. He could totally see it. To retaliate, he threw powder over her. She attacked his face with a tube of black lipstick. Soon, he wiped gray goop through her hair, and she sprayed his shirt with hairspray. Now I'm going to smell like a girl. He held his shirt away from his skin and frowned at it. It'll be an improvement. She half swallowed a laugh. Grinning, Brock grabbed Grace around the waist, picked her up, and tossed her out of the room, but not before she snatched a mascara wand off the counter. Twirling, she faced him, brandishing her weapon. You're not scary. You know that, right? He asked. You weigh like 100 pounds, and I can throw you over my shoulder. Just because I'm small doesn't mean I'm portable. She reached out, grabbed his shirt collar, and ripped it. He lunged at her, but she dodged him. While he was off balance, she jumped him. Moments later, they were engaged in a full-out makeup war, wrestling on the floor, trying to do the most damage to the other's makeup, hair, and clothes. Soon they were laughing so hard, he hoped she'd forgotten all about being mad at her grandparents, or worrying about her dad, or missing her mom. Chapter 18. A hot wind blew off the desert and circled through the park. Lanterns flickered in the falling dusk, casting a golden glow. In honor of the season, the Bavarian Main Street was draped in black crepe. Strings of skulls hung from the lampposts, and groups of ghouls, witches, and monsters wandered the streets. On the Jungle Cruise, actors dressed as headhunters danced among the robotic animals. In the haunted house, ghosts and witches flitted through the rooms, and Grace loved all of it, but not as much as she loved the feeling of Brock beside her, his warmth and hairspray smell, a constant reminder of how it felt to be wrestling with him on the floor. He occasionally took her elbow or put his hand on the small of her back, but he didn't try to hold her hand or kiss her. She wished he would. Ride after ride, show after show, and pretty soon all she could think about was kissing Brock. Until she saw Blanche. While most of the park goers were dressed in costume, Blanche still wore her red skirt, but now it made her look sickly pale, her lips a crimson red against her fair skin. The basket she had tucked over her arm shook with her emotion. She spotted them. Raising her arms, she waved from across the street. "Oh, friends, thank goodness you are here to rescue us." Blanche gushed before she sagged against Grace. "But what has happened to you? Why are you so disheveled and ugly?" Grace awkwardly patted Blanche's back. "You know, none of this is real, right?" Blanche pulled away, her eyes wide and frightened. "Of course it's real." "No, these are actors," Brock began. "You don't understand," Blanche said. "The queen is here. She's kidnapped the dwarfs. All of this might be, as you say, make-believe, but there's nothing fictional about the queen." Grace remembered the night she'd been kidnapped, the apple shoved in her mouth. That whole episode seemed so unreal and hazy, but Charmant had been fighting with someone. Who? Not the queen. Maybe a huntsman? But why? "She wants the mirror," Blanche answered Grace's unspoken question. "She'll do anything to get it back." "But the dwarfs don't know where the mirror is," Grace said. "She gave them lots of time to find it, and now she says their time is up. We must rescue the dwarfs and find the mirror." "Are you alone?" Brock asked. "No, Charmant is here as well." Grace could tell from Blanche's tone whether or not she thought this was a good thing. "Any idea where the dwarfs are?" Grace asked. "Yes, Simplet was able to escape. He was Charmant, trying to come up with a plan." "Simplet escaped?" Brock asked. Brock and Grace exchanged glances that implied Simplet wasn't the smartest in the bunch. "He's the smallest and managed to squeeze through a crevice in the rocks. The others are locked in a cave beneath Black Forest Mountain." Blanche shivered. "That horrid huntsman is keeping them captive." "Can you take us there?" Brock asked. Grace balked. "Wait, why don't we just call security?" "Do you really think that a security guard is going to believe that the wicked queen's huntsman is holding the 7 dwarfs captive?" Brock asked. "It's not okay to hold anyone captive, even if they're fairy tale people," Grace said. Blanche murmured in agreement. "But you don't understand the queen's power. She can make the dwarfs disappear like that." She snapped her fingers. Brock stood still, clearly trying to envision a security guard taking on a queen with magical powers. He shook his head as if trying to clear it and think rationally. "You're right. I don't know what to do." A thought struck Grace. "We need the huntsman to think we're just as magical as the queen." "But we're not," Brock pointed out. "We know that, but he doesn't. He doesn't know us at all. For all he knows, we can be just as magical, maybe even more so." Grace tapped her chin, thinking. "You said Simplet's out. Does he have his flask of whiskey?" Brock asked. "He has a flask of whiskey?" Grace repeated. Brock nodded. "Haven't you seen it?" Grace thought back, then forward. Slowly, a plan came together. "Undoubtedly," Blanche said. "Then all we need are some matches," Grace said. "What are you thinking?" Brock asked. "I don't think I like it." "We're going to blow fire." "We're going to start a fire at Sherwood Forest? Haven't you been listening to Freddie the Fire Hydrant?" "We're not going to start a fire. We're going to blow fire." She put her arm around Blanche and Brock's waist and drew them closer to tell them her plan. Chapter 19. "We need a match or a lighter, Simplet's whiskey, and your shirt." "My shirt?" Brock pointed at his chest. "Well, it can't be my shirt, and yours is already ripped to shreds." "By you?" Grace waved away his objections. Rolling his eyes, Brock started to lift the edges of his shirt. Grace put her hand on his chest. "Wait, you don't have to do it now. We have to get there first, and we need the whiskey and a lighter." "You must find Simplet and Charmant," Blanche said. "We'll get the stuff. You find the guys," Brock said to Blanche, "and we'll meet you at the entrance to Black Forest Mountain." Blanche agreed and turned away with a swirl of her skirt. Brock took Grace's elbow and steered her to a gift shop on Main Street. "I really don't like this. What do you know about blowing fireballs?" "We used to do it all the time on the farm," Grace said. That was in Oregon where everything was too wet to catch on fire. Shows what you know, Grace said. How many times have you done this? Brock asked. Well, I've seen it done lots of times by my older cousins, so theoretically. We can't be theoretical, Brock exploded. She patted his chest. Calm down. Inside the gift shop, Brock stopped in front of a variety of souvenir lighters. He chose the one shaped like a dragon. I hope this isn't an omen, he said, after he'd paid for it and pocketed it. A crowd of parkgoers, including Blanche, Simplay, and Charmant, were gathered at the entrance to Black Forest Mountain. How are we going to do this around all these people? Grace whispered to Brock. We're going to get arrested. Blanche must have overheard because she answered, There won't be any witnesses. Follow me. She dipped her head toward a shadowy corner and headed for an opening in the bushes. Where are we going? Grace asked. Brock's eyes told her he didn't know either, and he took her hand as they passed through a shelter of trees. I'm about to share with you a little-known secret, Blanche said over her shoulder. You must swear you must swear to us your complete discretion. Okay, Grace agreed. Brock shrugged. Sure, I guess. There can be no guessing. Blanche stopped at the mouth of the dark cave. You must pledge your loyalty to the fairy tale realm. By sharing this, one of our sacred portals, I am endangering our world, our people, and our way of life. Brock raised his hand as if taking an oath. I promise I will never do anything to harm anything in the fairy tale realm, Blanche finished for him. I promise I will never in any way do anything to jeopardize the fairy tale realm, Brock said again. Blanche raised her eyebrows at Grace, and she repeated Brock word for word. Satisfied, Blanche turned on her heel and led them into the cave. Brock whipped out his lighter and flicked it on. It provided a weak, flickering light. The walls were dirt, and the floor sloped downward toward the center of the earth. How? Grace tried to swallow her disbelief. Will Sherman know about this when he created the park, right? Absolute malt, Charmant said. Did you not know that Will is but one of us? What? Grace squeaked. Will Sherman is... You probably know him best as the Pied Piper, Blanche said. He adores large flocks of children. He can't help but gather little ones. It's in his very nature, Charmant said. But why did he come here? Why not just stay in the fairy tale world? Grace asked. Roy gave a sad sigh. He fell into disfavor over the rat debacle. True, Blanche agreed. No one can really forgive him for that. Ew, that's right, Grace said, remembering the tale. He killed a bunch of kids. Roy laughed. Common misconception. He didn't drown the children in the river. He just merely led them out of the realm. You mean they're here? Why does that surprise you? Blanche asked. I'm here. Charmant is here. The dwarves are here. Why do you guys get to come here, but we don't get to go there? Brock asked. What do you think would happen if people from your world came into our realm? Blanche asked. Exactly what's happening now, Simplay spoke up. They'd start stealing our stuff. Beside her, Brock flinched, knowing he was thinking of Cordelia. Grace squeezed his hand. The mirror has already been stolen, Simplay said. The magic flute disappeared ages ago. But we know Will took that, Charmant said. Blanche twirled around and put her finger to her lips, shushing them. If we can hear them, they can hear us, she whispered. Grace listened for something other than the sound of wind whistling through the mouth of the cave. Blanche waved at Brock, asking him to douse the lighter. Blackness immediately fell. Grace gripped Brock's hand. He felt warm, solid, and safe. Within moments, her vision adjusted to the gloom. They walked in silent darkness. After what may have been minutes, or maybe hours, she heard distant voices. Huntsman or dunceman, the grumpy dwarf called out. Yeah, your mother wore chainmail, said another. The huntsman grunted in reply, clearly unfazed. How long are you going to keep us here? Prof asked. Until I'm told to let you go, the huntsman said. Brock's hand tightened around Grace's. Let me do it, he whispered. Don't be silly, she replied. You don't know how. Neither do you, he returned. Grace tugged her hand out of his and peeked around the corner. The dwarfs were piled into a cell so small they barely had room to stand. A black iron gate separated them from the huntsman, the same man who had earlier kidnapped Grace. He stood ramrod straight with an axe clasped in his hand by his side. Prof's eyes widened in surprise when he saw the newcomers. Grace put her finger to her lips, asking him for silence. Grumpy saw them and pointed at the keys on a leather thong hanging from the huntsman's waist. Grace motioned for Simplé to hand over his whiskey flask. After popping the cork, she took a slug of whiskey in her mouth. Brock flicked the lighter and held it in front of her. She spat. A giant ball of fire illuminated the darkness. The dwarfs oohed their appreciation. The huntsman jumped back in surprise. While Brock and Charmant tackled him, Blanche snipped off the keys off his belt with the scissors she kept in her basket. She unlocked the cell. The dwarves piled out, and Brock and Charmant dragged the huntsman inside. "Where's the queen?" Blanche demanded as she turned the key in the lock. "She's searching for the mirror," the huntsman said as he sat on the floor, rubbing his head. "She must be found," Charmant said, wiping his hands, "or else she will come after the dwarves again." "You'll never find her," the huntsman growled. "She can take any shape or form," Blanche told us. "I don't get that," Grace said. "If she can take any shape or form, she can always be beautiful. Why does she need the mirror?" "Ah, that's what you don't understand," Blanche said, putting her hand on Grace's arm, "is that there is an inner beauty that mere men or fairy creatures cannot manufacture or purchase. It's made from within the soul. Those who possess it are unaware of it. Those who covet it will never possess it. The queen loves to be surrounded by beautiful things. She desires to be beautiful herself, but inner beauty doesn't come easily. It's won day by day, choice by choice. Also, the mirror doesn't reflect just the here and now. It also shows the past as well as the future and the present. But how does it know which is which? It's whatever the mirror chooses to be the most dominant. For example, the mirror would never reflect you dressed as thus in this drab garb, because it would know that this is not a true picture of your character. Beside Grace, Brock went very still. "I think I know where the mirror is." "You do?" Grace asked. "Are you sure?" Blanche asked. "Why didn't you say so earlier?" Prof asked. "My mom," Brock took a deep breath. "She loves to surround herself with beautiful things. She collects all sorts of things." Grace slipped her hand into his. "Your mom can't be the queen." He squeezed Grace's hand. "Maybe she is and maybe she isn't, but I still think I know where the mirror is." "So, assuming you're right, are you just going to hand it over to the queen?" Grace asked. Brock shrugged. "It's hers, isn't it?" The dwarves bobbed their heads, and Blanche and Charmant murmured yes. "Then let's give it to her," Brock said. "Maybe then the queen will stop threatening everyone and return to her own realm." "Where is it?" Grace asked. "It's at the shop, in the attic. I remember it because soon after I arrived, I heard whispering. I thought I was developing schizophrenia." He snorted a harsh laugh. "I did research on it, talked to my mom about it. She told me not to worry, and the whispering stopped. Well, not completely. When I put it in the attic, I didn't think of it at first because it doesn't look a lot like a mirror. It looks like a painting." Grace's thoughts went back to when she had also thought she heard whispering at the shop. "Won't your mom be mad if we take it?" she asked. "Possibly, but why does she have it anyway? Besides, I haven't seen my mom for weeks." He sounded bitter and angry, and Grace hurt for him. "Rather than going all the way back to the shop, do you want to call someone and ask them to bring it?" "It would have to be someone we trust." Brock bit his lip, thinking. After a moment, he shook his head. "I'll just go. That way, if I happen to see my mom, I can ask her about it." "Do you want me to come with you?" Grace asked. "No, stay here. I'm not sure how this conversation is going to go, although chances are I won't even see her, but I do need to try to talk to her." He laughed with sad, droopy shoulders. Grace tried to imagine his feelings, but his mom's experience was so different from hers, she just couldn't. "What now?" Grace asked the small crowd in the cave. "Let's go watch the fireworks show," Blanche suggested. "Formidable," said Charmant. "Not us," Prof said. "We're going home," the grumpy one said. "Oh, boys, are you sure?" Blanche asked. "Yeah," the sleepy one grumbled. "We're out of here," Grumpy announced. "If the queen's here, it's better if we're not," the shy one said. "You know you can't hide from her," Charmant said. "Yes, but if the boy has the mirror," Prof put in. "There's no reason to doubt him," another put in. "He seems reliable," Simplé said. "I trust him," Prof said. The sleepy one shook himself. "Much more than I trust the queen." "There's one more thing," Prof said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a shiny golden egg. He handed it to Grace. "Here," he said gruffly, "for everything." "But the mirror, you don't have it yet." "We know you'll do the right thing," Prof said, pressing the gold into her hands. "You should give this to Brock." It felt heavy, smooth, and warm. "How much is this worth?" Prof shrugged. More to you than to him. Don't get us wrong, we like him, but he doesn't need it like you do. Alrighty then, I guess this is goodbye, Blanche said. She hugged and kissed each one of the dwarfs. I will miss you all. What about you? When are you coming home? Prof asked her. Blanche stuck out her chin. I'm not sure yet. I like it here. I'm going to stay. At the Mirage? Charmant asked. Blanche made an unhappy noise. No, it's much too tidy. I'll have to find a house, preferably one that needs some housekeeping. Grace's mouth went dry as a thought occurred to her. She stared at the egg. It seemed to hold all of the answers. You want to do housekeeping? Of course, Blanche said. It's what I love most of all. Roy cleared his throat. Blanche shot him a quick, mean glance. It makes me feel useful and needed. I've had it with palaces and charmaids. You could live with my grandparents, Grace said. They need someone to clean for them. Blanche clapped her hands. I should love that. They're pretty horrible, though, Grace said. They can't be any worse than the boys, Blanche said, and they're certain to be better than the maids at the palace and the housekeeping crew at the hotel. And just like that, things clicked. Grace had someone to take care of the grand unit. She could take Heather and Toby back to Salmondale. Her mom could stay in Germany with her dad as long as she needed to. Grace felt dazed by the sudden, happy turn of events. And then she thought of Brock's droopy shoulders and how good it felt to hold his hand and how much she wanted him to kiss her. But did he want to kiss her? He'd had plenty of opportunities. She couldn't plan her life around someone who might kiss her someday. Everything had magically worked together and provided her with a way to go home. She had to take it. Blanche waved her hanky at the dwarfs as they moved deeper into the caves. Are you telling me that if I follow the cave, I'll end up in the fairy tale realm? Grace asked. Blanche smiled her answer. Roy stepped in front of Blanche. You are my wife. The palace is our home. You belong to me. Oh, phooey. Blanche pushed his shoulder and brushed past him. I belong to no one, she said without turning back. She strode away in the opposite direction of the dwarfs and the fairy tale realm. But, Charmant stuttered after her. True love. Hogwash and boulder dash. Blanche's words bounced off the dirt walls. That's all fairy tales. But we're fairy tales, Charmant insisted, going after her. That's who we are. Grace trailed after them. Hey, what about me? The huntsman called out. No one even turned around. Just because we were that way once doesn't mean we have to stay that way. Blanche lifted her chin. I can be whoever I want to be. Grace thought about pointing out that taking care of her grandparents wasn't going to be such a great life, but decided to stay out of it. When they got to the mouth of the cave, she watched Blanche march away with Charmant sniveling behind. Neither knew anything about getting along in this world. But then again, neither did she. Grace glanced at the egg. She could make this happen. With this gold, she could afford to get her family back to Salmondale. Grace had learned in her economics class that a standard gold bar used by central banks and bullion dealers was worth more than $500,000. This wasn't as large as a gold bar, but she didn't need $500,000. Maybe they had renters in their house now, but she could find another one until her lease was up. Her mom could eventually get her job back at the high school. Heather could work for Lucy and go back to the Art Institute. Grace slipped the egg into her pocket of the burgundy skirt and kept her hand on it for safekeeping. Thanks so much for listening to episode 10. Stay tuned. I'm hoping that our next episode could be close to the last. So if you enjoyed it, hit the like and subscribe button and tell your friends. Thanks.